Hi everyone, welcome back. So far in the series, we've explored what self-esteem really is, how it's shaped by culture, childhood, and trauma, and how to handle criticism and rejection without losing self-worth. Now we're tackling something that's essential for healthy self-esteem: setting boundaries. If you've ever felt guilty for saying no, struggled to stand up for yourself, or worried about disappointing others, this video is for you. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why boundaries are a sign of self-respect, not selfishness, and you'll have 3 simple steps to set boundaries without guilt. Let's take a moment to understand what boundaries really are. A lot of people think boundaries are about pushing people away, being aggressive, or putting up walls, but that's not true. Boundaries aren't about controlling others. They're about protecting and containing yourself. Think of boundaries like a fence around your house. A fence doesn't mean you never let anyone in. It means you choose who comes in, how they enter, and how long they stay. Healthy boundaries help you protect your time, energy, and emotions, build relationships based on mutual respect, show yourself that you matter. Without boundaries, self-esteem suffers because when you constantly say yes when you mean no, or let people overstep, you send yourself and them the message that their needs are more important than your own. The first step to setting boundaries is recognizing that you deserve to have them. And you deserve to have them because, you guessed it, you're important and you matter as you are. And because setting boundaries is sometimes challenged by guilt, I think it's worth talking about it here. The purpose of guilt is usually to signal that we veered off course from our values, and we need to make amends for that, and then reconnect with our values. The reason setting boundaries shouldn't elicit guilt is that we aren't doing anything wrong when we set boundaries. So should that feeling arise, we know that we're potentially caught up in some sort of codependent pattern that may need some unraveling. Codependence is probably worth putting in its own series, and maybe we will. But for now, it's enough to know that when we're setting boundaries appropriately and we feel guilt, there's probably something else going on, and we don't have to listen to that signal so strongly, especially because we're not doing anything wrong. The next step is to identify where you need boundaries. Before you can set boundaries, you have to figure out where they're missing. A good sign that a boundary is missing is when you feel resentful, like people expect too much from you. You could be exhausted because you're constantly overextending yourself, or invisible because your needs are always last or don't matter at all. If you're not sure where you need boundaries, ask yourself, where do I feel drained in my life? Who or what makes me feel used, overwhelmed, or taken for granted? Where am I saying yes when I really want to say no? Once you identify these areas, you're ready for the next step, learning how to actually set the boundary and communicate them clearly and confidently. Here's where a lot of people struggle. They worry that setting boundaries will make them seem rude, disappoint others, and maybe even ruin relationships. But a healthy boundary doesn't have to be harsh. It just has to be clear. We get that clarity by being assertive. Imagine a continuum, and on one end we put being passive, and on the other end of the spectrum we put aggressive. Assertive is that nice middle area where we aren't passive because we're communicating our needs and wants, but we're not aggressive because in communicating our boundaries, we are also respectful of other people's boundaries. We're not forcing them. I have the right to make reasonable requests of others, and they have the right to say yes and no for themselves. Think about a time when someone set a boundary with you in a way that felt respectful. Maybe they said something like, I'd love to help, but I can't take on anything extra right now. I'm not available this weekend, but let's plan for another time. I'd appreciate if you didn't comment on my appearance. These boundaries aren't aggressive, they're honest, direct, and respectful. And the best part, you can set them too. Let's try it. Think about one situation where you need to set a boundary. Now practice saying it in a way that's clear but kind. For example, instead of, "I can't believe you always dump work on me," try, "I won't be able to take on extra tasks this week." Instead of, "Stop invading my personal space," try, "I need some alone time right now." Instead of, "You're so negative, I can't stand it," try, "I'd appreciate if we kept the conversation more balanced." You're not responsible for how someone reacts to your boundaries. Some people might not like it. That's okay. A healthy person will respect your boundaries. Someone who doesn't, well, that's more information about them and not so much about you. Practice makes perfect. It may not come out right the first few times as you start to practice this new skill. It can all be robotic and a bit scripted, but keep at it. I have an assertiveness video you might find useful. I'll link it in the description anyway, check it out. Let's try a final reflection. If you can, grab a notebook or think about your answers. Where in your life do you need stronger boundaries? What's one small boundary you can set this week? How can you practice communicating it clearly? Now let me know in the comments, where do you struggle most with setting boundaries? What's one boundary you've set that made your life better? How do you handle the guilt that comes with saying no? I'll be reading them all. In the next episode, we'll talk about how to stop people pleasing and start prioritizing yourself without feeling selfish. As usual, hit that like button, subscribe, hit the bell to make sure you don't miss the rest in the series. We're halfway there.